Well, hey, we're on to the next case, which is this McCreary County versus American Civil Liberties Union. Case site on that is 545 U.S. 844. 2005 case that was in the courts through 2004 and 5, started in October 2004, ended up finished in June of 2005. I want to take this minute just to talk a little bit about the purpose of the ACLU. The ACLU is often misunderstood and considered by many to be a communist organization or somehow a bad thing, but really, truthfully, it's not. What they do is they try to maintain the Bill of Rights for all people. And that's a big task when you stop and think about it. It is a non-profit organization. They bring a lot of lawsuits on behalf of the poor, people that can't afford a lawyer, or some people can't find a lawyer because the topic is just too touchy. So when we get on the ACLU, don't think of it as a bad thing necessarily. Usually it just really depends on who is in trouble and what's going on, and really a lot of people get on it from the standpoint of, well, I don't like what side they're on in this case. But that's a lawyer's responsibility, is to represent everybody. Everybody's entitled to a lawyer in America. That's why we have so many lawyers. But just take this in, see what you think about it. Here again, it's a period of time from the early USA, at least especially 20th century, where they're deciding things like what's the role of religion in society in the context of the First Amendment. And so a lot of times we look at the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. If they think that here again that we're intertwining certain things too much in the fabric of public life, then they think that could be a violation because it's unfair to people that have different belief systems. And so, we work our way through this. Well, like I said, we're talking about this McCreary County, Kentucky. It is something to do with 10 Commandments being displayed in public school. This has been, 10 Commandments are being displayed all over the place. I love to tell this little story. Had a guy that had a real bad drinking problem. In fact, he was a painter, and painters were notorious for alcoholism because they were around paint fumes all day. In the old days, paint had lead in it, paint had all kinds of alcohol in it, and so it made it very difficult for people that worked around oil-based paints not to become addicted to alcohol and other substances. And truthfully, being around paint a lot also was bad for your lungs. So this gentleman was in to see me. He was in trouble, I think, for public intox or DUI or something like that, and he's talking. And at that particular time, there was a discussion in the county where I lived, and they were talking about should the 10 Commandments be put in our courthouse. And basically, he said, well, let me ask you a question. He says, I've panhandled to just about every church in this county, and I've never seen the 10 Commandments once inside a church. So if the 10 Commandments are so important, why aren't they on the walls of the church? Isn't that where you ought to be looking for them, not in a public building? So I thought, man, that's pretty profound for a guy that's basically an alcoholic, and so it's at least one thought, is why do they need to be in public buildings when, I've been in a lot of churches too, but for a different reason, and that was because I was being dragged to it by my parents. But, my grandfather was an evangelist, and he would be in like all the little churches all around throughout Indiana, and we'd be in a different one about every week just to support my grandfather, and I'm proud of that. The guy was phenomenal, really. Carpenter, farmer, had to be his own mechanic, because he's a very poor man. But yet he was out there spreading the word. He was out spreading the gospel all over the country, actually. And in the Depression, when it was very difficult. So, really proud of him. But it still doesn't change my view that we need to be very cautious about how we involve religion and government. It's got to be carefully done, because if we're not careful, we'll find ourselves in this position that we see right now going on in Oklahoma City, where the basically satanic cult are trying to put up a statue next to the Ten Commandments. Because if there really is freedom of religion, and people do believe in Satan as their God, as it were, which is an awful thought, but that's their right to believe that, then they need to have religious displays too. And if they're going to have religious displays on public ground, then they're entitled just like anybody else. And that's what you get into. And that's why people have really tried to be thoughtful about this and not just let people do whatever they want to do. So, one thing to always keep in mind, I always like to look at the vote. And I try to bring this up as often as possible. The vote in this case was 5-4, so it's a kind of a very marginal decision. It could be flipped over immediately after one election, for example. So these are important considerations. So basically the decision by the majority was that the display violated Establishment Clause, because the purpose had been to advance religion. And so that's really one of the problems that you get into. A lot of it is evidentiary, as just what did the people say, what was their reasoning, why did they feel like they needed it. One of the problems that you get into with the Ten Commandments is, what do they really say? And a lot of what they say, if you really look at it, is about 8 out of the 10 commandments have no bearing on, for example, crime or anything like that. It's all about your own moral situation, about your relationship with your wife, that you shouldn't have relationships with other people's wives and things like that. Well, that's not a crime. That's really more of a moral or religious type of thing. So there's a number of things like that. Definitely, obviously, theft is a violation of both the law and the Ten Commandments. But many others aren't like that. You have no other God before you. Well, where does that fit in the law? There's people that don't have any God at all. These are atheists. Well, how does that have a bearing on the legal system? It doesn't. So there's a lot of different things like that that are arguably not really that pertinent to what we're even talking about here. Well, hey, I hope that this has been somewhat helpful. That you get into on this McCreary then is, it's got to be, you're walking a very fine line. It's a tightrope. But this decision was 5-4. And, there's always room when you have a 5-4 decision for it to be overturned at a later time in another case. So let's just look down through the list and come up with another case to talk about, and we'll see how it comes out. Thanks for watching. We'll be back with something else here very soon.